Stay tuned for Truckers Life Radio, coming up next on tncradio.live.
Do you have the tncradio.live app? It's free and easy to download. Just go to app.tncradio.live, Google Play, or the App Store. Get access to live streaming radio developed by drivers for drivers. Download the tncradio.live app today.
Hello and welcome to tncradio.live. This is Truckers Life Radio. And now here's your host, Ron Frazier.
Welcome to Truckers Life Radio on tncradio.live. We're glad you're here to join us this evening. We have a special guest, Steve Winfield with Steve Winfield Ministries. And Steve is a gentleman that I've known for a little while now. He has an exciting ministry. He's been involved in a number of things, but I'm going to let Steve share that with you. So, Steve, thank you for joining our program this evening.
Well, Ron, it's a joy to be with you, and thanks so much for the opportunity. You asked me, first of all, to tell a little bit how I got started. Well, I'm the youngest of 7 kids. My dad was a gospel preaching Methodist preacher, and there's 10 years difference between me and my next brother. And I have 4 older brothers, 2 older sisters. By the time I came along, all my brothers were either in ministry or away at school preparing for ministry. And I probably was an identity crisis I went through, but it came out as rebellion. I was never as bad as I could have been. The Lord sort of had a holy governor on me, but I did not want to go into ministry. And I ran from that call for a number of years. But thank God for his grace and mercy and forgiveness and patience. 1970, I committed my life to the Lord. I still did not want to go into ministry. And how you sort all that out theologically, I don't know, because I prayed as a kid. I prayed as a young teen. I prayed my senior year in high school, responded to an invitation at a Ford Philpott crusade in Danville, Virginia. And I'd do good for a few weeks, but then I'd be back in the party scene doing what I wanted to do. And 1970, though, at Thomas Road Baptist Church, Lynchburg, Virginia, the Lord grabbed my heart. And again, thank God for his patience. But again, I said, I don't want to go into ministry. But later that year, that was in July, in September, I was at Thomas Road on a Wednesday night, and a very conservative independent Baptist preacher by the name of Lester Roloff. He had a guy's home and a girl's home in Corpus Christi, Texas, and he was preaching, and I answered the call to full-time ministry. But I said, Lord, I'm not telling anybody about this. If you want this to happen, you're going to have to make it happen. And so that was Wednesday night. My dad's church was starting or in a revival, and so I was off Friday night. So I said, well, I'll go to and hear the guy. And there'd been an accident or death or something. The evangelist that was preaching was going to have to leave after Friday night. They'd announced that it was going to go through Sunday night. So I'm out in front of the church talking to a bunch of my friends, and some of the leaders went to my dad and said, well, why don't we ask Steve to preach Saturday night, Sunday night, and we'll have a youth emphasis. And my dad said, go talk to him. So I just promised the Lord this on Wednesday night, said, I'm not telling anybody. And they came and said, we think you should preach Saturday night and Sunday night. And we'll announce it tonight. It's going to be a youth emphasis. And I said, yeah. And so that night I stayed up half the night trying to get a sermon together. And Saturday morning I was riding around praying, Lord, what am I supposed to do? Just tell my testimony or whatever. And I went over to Lynchburg, Virginia. We lived about 12 miles from Lynchburg, and went to the Baptist bookstore. And I guess I was looking for something to jump off the wall, but I saw an album. That's when we had albums preaching. One side was Samson, one side was the Second Coming. So I bought it and I went home and listened to side 1, which was Samson, and I thought that's pretty good. So I listened to it again and wrote down the outline. I listened to it a third time, and that night I preached on Samson and had 27 first-time decisions in a local church. And so Sunday afternoon I listened to side 2. I told Dr. Graham that story. He said, thank God there's power in the Word of God. So my first 2 sermons were from Billy Graham, and I found another one somewhere, and I started getting invitations to do revival, youth retreats, whatever, and youth revivals. And that continued all the way. I went back to college. I'd quit school. I was working at a nuclear power plant outside of Lynchburg, Virginia, and went back, got my college degree, and a 1-year seminary. Barbara and I got married. Was working as a youth evangelist for Dr. Myron Augsburger, who was president of this Eastern Mennonite College at the time. And his chairman of the board was pastoring a church in Roanoke, Virginia. And he asked me to come as his associate. And I knew I could continue to work with Interchurch Incorporated if I did that. So I did and continued that. For 8 years, I served as pastor there. After 2 years, the senior pastor was called to another church, and they asked me to become senior pastor. And I thought that's what I would end up doing the rest of my life. But after 8 years, I felt like the Lord released me, and I had always felt called to be an evangelist. And even during those 8 years, I would hold 2 or 3 revivals or crusades where I would just go in and preach. We didn't do any setup. And then we had a Bill Glass crusade in Roanoke, Virginia, and I was on the committee, and I met the person that was directing Bill's crusade. He was leaving to start his own ministry, and he asked me if I would come and serve as his crusade director, which was invaluable because I learned all the nuts and bolts of putting crusades together. And then I wanted to finish my seminary, so I went back to Trinity Evangelical Divinity School to study under Dr. Robert Coleman, the author of the Master Plan of Evangelism. And so I finished out my seminary, served as his teaching fellow my last year, which was a significant part of my education. I love him dearly. He's 93 now and still one of my key mentors. The other one is Dr. Elmer Towns. Dr. Towns and I have been praying together for 38 years every Sunday morning. Either he calls me or I call him. We pray together and go over our week schedule. But so that morphed into my own ministry, Winfield Ministries. And we did basically what Billy Graham did in smaller communities than Graham would go to. And that was wonderful. I loved it. We did crusades all over the East Coast, out into the Midwest. We usually do about 8 a year. And it was just a phenomenal, wonderful experience. I have friends from all over the place as a result of that. But it got to the point, for me at least, I'm not condemning anybody else that chooses to do something else. It seemed to me that the number of unsaved people coming to those events kept declining. And it was becoming much more expensive to get a crowd together. Jars of clay, Toby Mac, etc. All that's wonderful, but it's expensive. And so NASCAR opened up to me, and we started doing NASCAR races, setting up in a campground, and it's been a wonderful experience. Now, COVID shut it all down, and by the time it opened back up, we already had our schedule set, and so haven't done any this year, but we are planning next year, God willing, to do a number of NASCAR races. It's been, again, as I said, a wonderful experience. When I first started it, a lot of people didn't understand what I was doing and accused me before swine or whatever. In fact, we were doing a event at the Daytona International Speedway. I was going to be speaking in the Geico Caveman Campground, which is in Turn 3, and I put it on Facebook. And right away, this person came back. I've gotten to know him. I didn't know him at the time. And he said, "Help me out. How can anything redemptive come out of a NASCAR race?" I said, "Well," he said, "they're centered around wasting natural resources, risking lives, and drunkenness and debauchery." I said, "You nailed it. That's why I'm there. Jesus said, go fishing, and I've yet to find a more well-stocked pond." And so that has been a wonderful experience. And it also opened my eyes to a great need within our country. We're still losing 22 veterans a day to suicide. And that doesn't count spouses and children. A lot of people feel that number is greatly understated. I do know this, that there's a lot of pain within that community. The experience of what we started honoring veterans at each of our events has been overwhelming. And it's just God has opened a huge door for us. And we tried to go through it and do everything we can to reach as many people. my philosophy from the get-go, and I got this from Dr. Jerry Falwell, use every available means to reach every available person. And so that's what we've been trying to do for the past 40 years. And it's just been exciting. Of recent, the Lord has really encouraged me wherever I've gone. Different people have come and said, I got saved at this crusade, or I got saved at this event, whatever. I don't know if the Lord felt I needed encouragement, but just to know that what you've done for years has had a significant impact on the lives of all kinds of people. And I'm honored, I'm humbled to know that the Lord has used for Christ, and I want to keep doing that as long as. And I'm committed to that, and I love doing what I'm doing. I love exalting the name of Christ and asking people to make the most important decision in all of life, and that is to know Christ. So that's what I do. That's what I love doing, and that's what I plan to keep on doing. And I thank you for this opportunity.
Steve, that's an amazing story. And I remember you telling us one time, or at least telling me, that you wanted to preach to the unsaved, not the saved. So when we come back from break, we're going to talk about that. And I want you to talk a little bit more about the racetrack chaplaincy work, ministry, evangelism you were doing, because I think a lot of people have the idea that that's really not evangelism. I don't know why, but I think they have that idea that evangelism is something different. But I agree, you tend to get more believers than unbelievers at some of these events. So when we come back, we're going to talk more about that. But right now, we're going to break. So to our listeners, stay tuned. We'll be right back.
5 tips for becoming a great truck driver. Being a truck driver is a rewarding career, but being a great truck driver is even more rewarding. Truck driving is not an easy job. It requires hard work and dedication. Truck drivers take pride in the hard work they do. After all, without truck drivers, our grocery and convenience stores would be empty. Whether you're a rookie or a veteran driver, there's always room to improve your skills as a truck driver. Here are 5 tips for becoming a great truck driver. Safety. Truck driving is considered one of the most dangerous jobs in America, so safety must be a driver's #1 priority. Truck drivers are responsible for keeping their freight, themselves, and other motorists on the road safe. Other drivers on the road may not know the difficulties and challenges truckers face on the road, so truck drivers may have to go the extra mile to ensure everyone's safe on the road. Prioritize health. A truck driver will prioritize their health. After all, taking care of your health can help you have a long-lasting, successful career as a truck driver. It's no secret that truck driving is considered an unhealthy profession. Drivers lack healthy food options, exercise, and a good sleep schedule. Stay compliant with federal regulations. Trucking rules and regulations are monitored by 2 organizations, one at a state level and one at a federal level. The trucking rules and regulations are established at a federal level. Staying compliant with federal regulations is essential for keeping yourself and others safe on the road. It can also save you from getting fines, which in return saves you time and money. Maintain a clean driving record. The best way to avoid traffic violations is to be aware of all the moving and non-moving violations you could get. Certain violations can affect the eligibility to operate a commercial motor vehicle. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration provides a list of violations. If you're issued a citation for FMCSA safety violations, your CDL could be in danger of suspension. Here are some things that can cause you to get a point on your driving record or possibly a suspended CDL. Speeding, following too close, overweight, traffic violation, reckless driving, driving without proper endorsements, logbook errors. Drivers must be aware that any type of violation could result in a loss of their CDL. Balance trucking and home life. The last tip for becoming a great truck driver is balancing truck and home life. Truck driving is hard and demanding work. Becoming a truck driver means spending many hours and days on the road. You'll sacrifice a lot for your trucking career. For many long-haul truck drivers, it's hard to separate life at work from life at home. Learning how to have a balance between home life and work life is essential if you want to have a long-lasting career in trucking.
You're listening to TNCRadio.live. Remember to tune into the Truckers Network Show with Shelley Johnson, weekdays at 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern. welcome back to Truckers Life Radio with Ron Frazier, right here on tncradio.live.
Welcome back to Truckers Life Radio. I'm Ron Frazier, your host. I'm here with Steve Winfield from Steve Winfield Ministries. And Steve, listening to you talk in the previous segment before we went to break, you talked about the idea that there are people who are coming to an evangelistic event that weren't necessarily the unsaved. And you had once shared with me that your preference, obviously, is to preach to the lost, not to the saved. And so how did all of that fit into your changing from the evangelistic tent meeting kind of thing to the racetrack ministry and kind of dealing there, and then where you go from there? And also share a little bit about your retreat center.
Okay, well, thank you, Ron. Again, it's an honor to be with you. And well, I could take you to the spot. We were Luke and I. He thinks it was in Pennsylvania. I thought it was in Ohio, but either way, we were doing a community-wide event. We were at the fairground in the grandstand, and it was packed. And I've always been I am and always will be a relational guy. I walk through the crowd before the service starts, talk to people, thank them for being there. And I had just come back behind the platform and was praying. And Luke Weaver came around and said, "What's wrong? You look upset." I said, "Well, Luke, I'm an evangelist. I've been walking through the crowd, and 90% or more of these people are churched. They're Christians." I said, "What am I supposed to do? God called me to be an evangelist." Now, I love preaching to the church. I do camp meetings. I do Bible conferences. That's wonderful. I enjoy that. But my primary gift is that of an evangelist. And so NASCAR opened up to us. I had done a crusade in a festival in Bristol, Tennessee. I'd never been to a race. I'd been to some dirt tracks when I was in college and stuff. But as a result of being there, Jeff Bird, who was chairman of Bristol Motor Speedway, was on our committee. And I got invited out to the track. In fact, we had a committee meeting in one of the suites out there prior to the festival that we were doing. And then as a result of that, I got to do chapel on a Sunday morning at Bristol Motor Speedway. It was 165,000 sellout day at Bristol. If you've never been there, don't know anything about NASCAR. It's the fastest half mile in the world. They call it the last great Coliseum. But I came out of that chapel and looked at 165,000 people sitting around this NASCAR track. And I said, as an evangelist, I began to froth at the mouth. I said, there's got to be. Well, Bristol gave me the first opportunity to do it. And I tell people that first one, I learned how not to do it. They said we could use the drag strip. Well, that looked good to me. It had bathroom facilities, you had all the seating and all. And it never occurred to me that NASCAR fans are going to be off the NASCAR track. We had a great event in some respects. We were the first televised Facebook thing that ever took place. In fact, Facebook tried to sue us, but we didn't do anything wrong. But they changed the platform so nobody else could do what we did. But we had hits from all over the world. We had Russia, Romania, China, Africa, all over Europe. It was great. But our only real successful event was at the actual site was Wednesday night when we had youth night. And we had about 300-400 kids there. And I think about 90 made decisions for Christ that night. So that was wonderful. But it gave me that vision for the ministry that God opened up to us. And the first 2 years, we were in the fan zone of a racetrack. In other words, we were outside the bowl. And it was good because if you've ever been to a race, there's all kind of trailers. Each driver has a trailer where they sell merchandise, and there are other things. It's like being at a carnival, basically. And you're going to hold people for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then you're going to move on to something else. But we ended up in a campground in Darlington, and I had a double amputee from Iraq that shared his testimony with me. And afterwards, we were sitting backstage, and he asked me a question that really nailed me to the wall. And here's the question: where is the most dangerous place to serve in the U.S. military? And I said, at the time, Iraq. He said, "You're wrong." I said, "What do you mean I'm wrong?" I said, "What are you talking about? Something going on that I don't know anything about?" He said, "Evidently." And that's where I learned of the suicide issue. And I felt like God spoke to me immediately and said, somebody's got to do something. And so what we started doing, I came up with a medal. We started honoring veterans at each night, Friday night, Saturday night, and we bring all the veterans of active duty military forward at our event and hang a medal around their neck. The crowd goes nuts. I mean, if whatever you think of NASCAR fans, several things about them. They love America. They love the military, and they have a reverence or respect for God. So we just took that opportunity to honor them and then transition into a gospel presentation, not a long sermon, but a clear gospel presentation to give people an opportunity to make the most important decision that anyone could ever make. And so God has honored that, and we've seen such wonderful response. And the wonderful part of that is this too, because the next year when we're back, because we go back to the same track, a lot of tracks like Michigan has 2 races. Dover at the time had 2 races, and Dover and Michigan have been 2 of our best tracks. We only do day races because at night people don't want to go anywhere because of traffic and alcohol. There's a lot of liquid consumption that goes on in a race, and you just got to be aware of that. But they know they're broken, they know they're messed up, many of them. There's a lot of godly people go to races too. I'm not saying that everybody's that, but there's a lot of partying that goes on at a race. And some people don't even go to the race. It's like a community event. They come and they camp and they have a good time together, and they drink a lot. Well, but God has opened that door for us, and we've seen God do wonderful things. And that's where I became aware of the need within the military community. Well, about 6 years ago, God gifted us 500 acres of land over in West Virginia, where we started building a retreat for veterans and pastors. And a lot of people don't realize that pastors are in about as much trouble as veterans. Emotional stress, and even to the point some have committed suicide, which is terrible for anybody. But how a pastor gets to that point is beyond me. But they're in pain, and they need help. So God's allowed us to build this retreat center where we bring pastors and veterans over and just love on them and are there to, we've even hired counselors to come in during a veterans weekend to be there to deal with, because I'm not a counselor. I'm a preacher. I love people. I can pray with them, but a lot of this pain, plus I've never been in the military. I just have a heart for it. And there's so much pain in that community. You really need somebody that has been there and knows that they trust. And so we have a team of veterans that have come alongside of us. And whenever we have a veterans retreat, like Scott Wanger, who is on staff with me now full time and runs the Lodestar Mountain Inn, he is still currently in the National Guard. He's a sergeant major within the National Guard. So we got Scott, and then another gentleman who's retired from the military and was a chaplain in the military. He's volunteering with us. And so we have a staff that can meet this need now. And when we bring veterans in to pray over them, to give them a good time, either hunting, fishing, or whatever, in a quiet spot where they're surrounded by people that love them, support them. I could spend all day telling you stories of people that have literally gotten in a fetal position in front of our stage, weeping uncontrollably because of the pain that they're carrying. And to have somebody put value on them, love them, and show support for them, for many of them, it's just absolutely overwhelming. I had a Vietnam veteran several years ago that he came and just literally, if I hadn't held him up, he'd have fallen on the ground. He started saying, "Thank you, sir. Thank you." I said, "Man, thank you for your service." And when he got control of himself, he said, "When I came back from Vietnam, people yelled at me. They cursed me. I had one person spit on me. And tonight's the first time in 40 years that I felt honored." So the pain is there. And I just encourage everybody everywhere. Everybody can be a friend to a veteran. Just love on them. If you don't do anything but say thank you, or if you see somebody in uniform at a restaurant, pay for their meal. Just let them know that we value who they are and the service, because we're do things like this radio station and this radio program because of sacrificing of a lot of people who laid their lives on the line so that we could be free. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Steve, that's amazing. Many of our listeners, the professional drivers, are men and women who are veterans.
That's right.
And they can relate to a lot of what you're saying. They can relate to the struggles and the issues, and I think, when we come back again, we've got to go to break, but, this might be an opportunity for them to come to a place where they can feel honored as well, where they can feel welcome. And so, part of what we'll talk about a little later is how they can connect with you. In the last segment, we'll talk about that. But I appreciate what you do for our veterans. And when we come back from break, we'll talk about that. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Dr. Christopher Cortman, and now for the Mental Health Minute. A friend calls a friend and says, I haven't seen you in ages. What do you say we get together this weekend? And so they make plans, and the one friend picks up the other friend from his home, and they go out and they get a bite to eat, and they see a movie, and they have a great time. And the one friend is dropping the other friend off. The friend says, you want to come in for a minute? They notice that somebody broke into the place and completely trashed it. Everything is broken. Everything is destroyed. And the one friend says, no, I don't know what to do, but just let me be, and I'll figure this out. And the other friend says, are you sure there isn't anything I could do? He says, please, I got this. So he leaves, and he calls the next couple of days and doesn't get any real response. And then the two buddies go back to their normal lifestyle. And then some 6 months later, the one friend calls the other one back and says, hey, it's been a while again. What do you say we get together this weekend? And the one guy says, sure, you want to pick me up again? He says, I'd be delighted to. So the one guy drives over to the friend's house, and he knocks on the door, and the friend opens the door. And much to his horror, the place is still trashed. It's exactly the way it was when they got home that night. Everything's still in shambles. It's destroyed and in disarray. And he says, you didn't change anything. You didn't. And the one says, I didn't make this mess, and I'm not going to clean it up. Well, that's ridiculous. It's a made-up story. But isn't that what we do when we've been cheated on, lied to, molested, hurt in some way? We carry that resentment with us, and we leave it that way for our entire lives because we feel like somebody owes it to come back and clean up that mess. I have good news and bad news. The good news is the mess can be cleaned up. The bad news is it's probably not going to be done by the person who hurt you. It's up to you to be able to work through that pain and clean up the mess.
Be sure to listen to Building Strong Minds with Dr. Chris, Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, right here on tncradio.live.
Ride with the Women Road Warriors Tuesdays at 8, 7 Central on tncradio.live.
Welcome back to Truckers Life Radio. I'm Ron Frazier. I'm here with Steve Winfield. Steve, you shared about caring for the veterans for the retreat center that you have. And that's exciting to me because I think our veterans are left in the cold so many times. And so I want to ask you, first of all, as we come back, what's next for you? The retreat center is there, and I'm sure that this is a great place for pastors and veterans. But what do you see for the future of Winfield Ministries, and what does that look like for you, and what do you have in the wings?
Well, that's a great question, Ron. I want, number one, for the Lord to direct our every step. and I want to be walking in obedience to his will and his plan and his purpose for my life and for this ministry. You know, a lot of people have criticized me at times. I shouldn't say a lot. There have been those that have criticized me for changing things. But, you know, anybody that's in business today, if you were doing business the way you did 40 years ago, you'd be out of business today. And you look at the state of the church in North America, and the church in North America is in deep trouble. Now, there are a lot of great churches, and I thank God for everyone. A lot of them support our ministry. But you always have to look at what you need to course correction as you go. The gospel never changes, but you have to look for new addresses to take that gospel message to. That's what the NASCAR ministry is all about. Taking it to a new location, doing it in a different way, but not changing the gospel. Well, what we're doing at the Lodestar Mountain Inn is wonderful, and God has blessed that. And we're seeing people come to know Christ. We're seeing people healed and restored from pain and injury that they've experienced, and we want that to continue. One of the things that we have started this year is I'm leasing the property to an organization called One Life Institute. So we have 22 students, high school graduates, somewhere between 18 and 20, and they're going to get they're getting 30 hours of college credit. It's education done in a little different ways. They get their credit through Clarion University, which is in Pennsylvania, and it's all transferable even to a state university, half of it in leadership training, the other half in discipleship. And so that transfers even to a state university as a religion course. So I'm very, very excited about training and equipping a new generation to do the work of evangelism. And that's one of the gifts or responsibilities of somebody that has the gift of evangelism. It's not something you just do yourself. You train and equip others to do it. I love preaching to large crowds, but I could preach to a stadium full of people every day of my life for the rest of my life and not make the impact that I can have by training 22 to 30 young people every year and doing multiplication ministry. And so that's what we want to do. And that's what we are doing. And you can take your calculator and figure that out. If I train you to do evangelism, and so it's just the two of us now, but then next year, each of us do one, that's 4. And then the next year, that's 8. And the next year is 16. And it doesn't take very long to reach the entire population of the world. A lot of people are shocked at that, but just get your calculator out and do it. It's doable. With even at my age, within my lifetime, if we would do that and do it effectively and efficiently, we could reach the world. So I'm this eternal optimist that believes that there's got to be a way to do this. So I just want to use, as I said in the early segment, every available means to reach every available person. Now, I'm currently in conversation with several other ministries. We're in the process of ordering a food trailer. And this will enable us to go into, and we got several organizations that are going to give us food. So we can go into any community and bless the veterans, the first responders of that community. You know, over these past several years, the pain that has come to the people that wear blue or the people that are first responders, it just breaks my heart. We ought to be respecting and loving and supporting these people in every way possible. You know, they're bad preachers. I know that. But the vast majority of people that answer the call of God are good people. And I'm sure they're bad cops, but the vast majority of them are great people. Sometimes truckers get a bad rap, but the vast majority of truckers on the road, many of them veterans, are great drivers that are just out there trying to earn a living and do a good job. We need to do everything we can to support our communities, to support our states, this nation. I am so thankful for America. I've had the privilege of preaching in over 38 different countries from all around the world. And, you know, I love all of them, but I've yet to find a place as blessed as the United States is. Are we perfect? No. Are there things that need to be improved? Yes. But we don't tear down a culture just because there's some bad things that happen. I thank God for every person that wears blue. I thank God for every person that answers the call to serve our nation as first responders, be it fire, rescue, whatever your position is. And we want to do everything we can to bless those people, to share the good news with those people. And so this food trailer, what we plan to do is pull in community after community and give food away to every first responder, every veteran that wants to come and get a hamburger, hot dog, barbecue, whatever we have. And so, again, looking for every available means to represent Christ well in this community. I love to preach and I love to share the gospel, but I want to share the gospel in every way I can. I want people to see Jesus in me. I want to be contagious, and I want everybody that knows Christ to be contagious. That's why we should never be judgmental. You know, God loves everybody, and it's not up to me to judge. That's God's business. My job, our job, is to take the gospel of Christ to everybody possible. And I want to invite all your truckers. We can't take all of you at one time, but we've had a number of truckers, veterans, companies that have sent some of their truckers over for a retreat at the Lodestar Mountain Inn. So I tell every trucking firm out there, if you want to plan a retreat for your veteran drivers at the Lodestar Mountain Inn, we'd love to have you. We'll do everything we can to make that possible. So that's what I'm all about. That's what I love doing. That's what I want to keep doing as long as God gives me breath to do that. The fields, as Jesus said, are white in the harvest. He said, pray that the Lord of the harvest will send forth laborers in the field. And we labor in all different kind of ways. A Christian, a person that owns a trucking firm that's a believer, they have a responsibility to use the resources that they have to help reach the world. I have a responsibility to use what God's given me to reach as many people as I possibly can. So it's all working together. You know, one of my favorite scriptures, and a lot of people don't even know this is in the Bible, is Luke 16, verse 10. Use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. And I'll guarantee you, Ron, there are people that support your ministry that will never have met some of the truckers that come to Christ through your ministry. But I believe in the providence of God. When they die and go to heaven, there are going to be truckers that have died before them that are there because of their financial support or support in other ways, and they'll be there to greet them. I had the privilege of being at Dr. Billy Graham's funeral. As I was sitting there with one of my mentors, Dr. Elmer Towns, co-founder of Liberty University, I was just overwhelmed with the thought of Dr. Graham entering heaven and all this multitude of people that had come to faith in Christ through his ministry that were there to welcome him. Well, I want people to be there to welcome me when I get home. I want people to be there to welcome your listeners when you go home. And the only way for that to happen is for us to be all in and reaching every available person and using every available means to do that. And so be it NASCAR, be it a local community outreach, be it the Lodestar Mountain Inn, or our Lodestar Guidance Program, which is a leadership program, I just believe we have to use whatever resource God gives us to reach and equip as many people as possible. The other thing I'd like to invite you to do, if you have a high school student that's not sure what they want to do, have them contact me through Winfield Ministries and at least apply for the One Life Institute. Now, we can't accept but about 30 a year. We have a cap on, we think size matters. So I want you to consider that.
Steve, you made a valid point when you said mission stays the same, but the model changes, and you're looking for a way, every possible means to minister to the people. And the reality of that is sometimes we have to minister to the physical needs before they're willing to listen to anything else. And so I am so excited about the mindset that you have about being out there and doing whatever you can do to minister to the needs of people in an effort to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with them. So when we come back, we're going to talk more about that, but we're going to break. So we ask our listeners, as always, stay tuned. We'll be right back.
I'm Shelley Johnson with Kathy Tuccaro. You can hear us Tuesdays on tncradio.live at 8 p.m. Eastern on Women Road Warriors. And don't miss Steve Summers' Overnight Drive right here on tncradio.live, weeknights midnight to 5 a.m. Eastern. Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
For the latest in rideshare and gig economy news, visit uberliftdrivers.com. That's uberliftdrivers.com.
Welcome back to Truckers Life Radio. I'm Ron Frazier, your host. Wow, time has flown. But we're spending time with Steve Winfield, Winfield Ministries, and Steve had shared, such a valid point that often the ministry, the mission, vision that organizations have stays the same, but the model definitely has to change, and our culture has taught us that. And so Steve has talked about the opportunity to that they are trying to provide to minister to our veterans and our first responders by providing a food truck and some other avenues of ministry. And that's all part of evangelism. Although we don't often see it from that perspective, it is. Taking care of the personal needs of the people we are trying to minister to first often opens many doors. So, Steve, we've got a lot of listeners out here, both here and overseas, and we're excited about that. But what if they want to get involved in your ministry? Share with them, how they can do that and the various avenues of serving with you, partnering with you, giving to your organization. Just give us an outline of how people can respond to this program and what they've heard tonight.
Well, let me start by saying, Ron, we are a part of ECFA, Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability. I think we're charter members. We've been a part of that organization basically ever since it came into existence. The other thing, I do not handle any money within the ministry. I receive a salary check from the ministry on the 15th and 30th, and all of that was set up for accountability reasons. I don't want to do anything wrong. I've tried to keep a clean slate. I feel I have. I've been in ministry for almost 50 years now, and just loved every bit of it. My dad, when I left home, he said, "Son, I've given you a good name. Now you take care of it." And I've tried to do that. First of all, I want to honor the Lord in all that I say and all that I do. If someone wants to find out more about our ministry, I'll give you our websites. The first one is wingfieldministries.org, WINGFIELD ministries.org. The other one is Lodestar, LODESTAR, mountainin.com. A lot of people ask, where does that name Lodestar come from? Well, some of your drivers are probably Navy veterans. Lodestar is the navigational star, the North Star. And so that's why we chose the name Lodestar. We have a program called Lodestar Guidance, which is a leadership character program. There are 48 videos and material that go along with that. A number of businesses are using that as a character development program. So you can go to lodestarguidance.com. That's one of our websites. But the Lodestar Mountain Inn, if you want to register for a veterans retreat, you want to register for a pastor's retreat, you want to come for one of our getaway weekends. We have several of those each year where we just invite friends to come in and enjoy the weekend. So that's Lodestar, LODESTAR, mountainin.com. Just the word mountain, INN.com, lodestarmountainin.com. And then if you want to find out about our Victory Weekend ministry, that's our NASCAR, our veterans outreach, anything we do, usually around a weekend activity at a race or in a community. That's victoryweekend.com. So that's all of our information is on my website, wingfieldministries.com.org, wingfieldministries.org. The others are .com, lodestarmountainin.com, lodestarguidance.com, and victoryweekend.com. If you go to the lodestarmountainin.com, you'll see all kind of beautiful pictures. I tell people it's not the end of the world, but you can see it from there. It's remote and beautiful because of the quietness of the place. You can hike, you can fish, you can just all kind of just wonderful activities. And we'd love you to come over and be a part of it, just to get away. That's why we called it a getaway weekend. You can go get away and just be refreshed in the presence of the Lord and the beauty of his creation. You know, the Bible says the heavens declare the glory of God and the firmament shows his handiwork. And it's just a good place to do all of that. But I would invite every trucking company. You can have an executive retreat at the Lodestar Mountain Inn, but you can send your veteran drivers to us when we have a Veterans Weekend. Now, we try to limit the Veterans Weekend where it does not overwhelm veterans. Most of them like smaller groups. So we try to limit those to about 14 couples or 14 individuals per weekend. But we will do our best to make it work. If you want it just to be drivers from your company, we can make that happen. So let us know. We want it to be used year round. And so we'd love to have you. Now, you had another question you wanted me to answer, Ron?
Yeah, Steve, I'm wondering, do you have volunteer opportunities for whether it be at your Victory Weekend or anywhere within your organization that if our people wanted to come and volunteer to help you in any way, do you have that opportunity for them?
Absolutely. If you're gifted with any kind of construction ability, right now we're trying to finish up 2 dorms for our students. We have had to cut down on the number of rooms we have available right now because we have the guys living in the basement of the first house we built, and we have the girls living in the upstairs and downstairs of 2 of the cottages that we built. So now we should be in the girls' dorm by the 1st of November. We had a little curve. We had a big curve thrown at us about 2 weeks ago. The fire marshal came in and said, "Oh, we forgot to tell you when you got your building permit, you got to have a fire alarm system and a sprinkler system put in," and that threw us about $160,000 curve. So you can pray that the Lord provide that for us, because we got to have that in before we can get an occupancy permit. So we're working hard at making all of that happen. But yes, if you can cut wood, firewood, if you can do cleanup work, if you can, especially if you can do carpentry, we have a place for you to serve. Go to my website, let me know, and we'll provide, if you come over to work, we'll provide you with a place to stay and food. So we just need strong backs to help us get where we need to be.
Good. Hey, Steve, I'm probably taking a big risk here with the short time we have left and you being an evangelist, but if you had to leave our listeners with one thing to remember from this broadcast, what would that be?
Okay, I'm going to ask 2 questions that are very, very important for all of us to deal with. And the first one, Ron, is this. Have you come to the place in your spiritual life where you know for sure if you die, you go to heaven? Now, that's a great question, because most people that I meet will say yes. I try to do my best. I'm a good person, a good husband, good wife, good mom, good dad, good citizen, etc. And all of those are wonderful things, but that's not the right answer. So I asked the second question. Well, and it's this. I hope you don't, but let's suppose you would die today and God would say, "Why should I let you into my heaven?" What would you tell him? And there's only one answer, and that answer is Jesus. And if you've never made that decision, you're driving right now, you're listening to this broadcast, I pray that even right as you drive down the road, acknowledge your need. And the need is that I'm broken. The one talking to you right now is broken. And my only hope of salvation is Jesus. I have sinned because the Bible says all of us have. You have, I have, everybody has. So I'm sorry for what I did. That's what repentance is all about. I realize, Lord, I have sinned. And I asked him by the power of his Spirit to forgive my sin. And he said he would. He said he'd remove it as far as the east is from the west and never, ever remember it again. So if you're carrying a burden, you got pain in your life, you got sin in your life, get rid of it. Just give it to Jesus. You say, I've done too many bad things. How about the thief on the cross? He committed murder. He cursed Jesus. And Jesus, he asked Jesus this question, remember me when you get in your kingdom. And Jesus said, today you'll be with me in paradise. He didn't pray the sinner's prayer. He didn't hear anybody preach a sermon. He just turned to Jesus and said, remember me. And Jesus said, you'll be with me in heaven today. My friend, that's all you got to do. Ask Jesus to forgive your sin and come into your life, and he will answer that prayer. And if you do that, I want you to send me a message. I'll send you a book called Building Your Faith, and you can get established in your faith. And I'll look forward to hearing from you.
Mm-hmm. Steve, you've given us some powerful words, and we appreciate that. And I hope our listeners are taking advantage of this opportunity to just take a look and evaluate their lives and to look at where they stand in relationship to Jesus Christ and their walk with him. So, Steve, it's been a real pleasure to have you on, brother. And we'll be praying for you and praying for all that your ministry does. And, we look forward to having the opportunity to talk with you again.
I look forward to it, Ron. Thank you so much. And I pray for Transport for Christ. May God continue to keep your hand strong upon the ministry, both in America and internationally.
Thank you, brother. That's our program. And so we look forward to getting this podcast out, and we will be back in another week. Take care. Lord bless.
I hope you enjoyed the show. Let us hear from you. Send email to truckerslife@tncradio.live. Stay tuned.
Don't forget, you can hear all of our TNC Radio primetime shows again on our podcasts. Just go to tncradio.live/podcasts or search for tncradio.live wherever you listen to podcasts.
Do you have the tncradio.live app? It's free and easy to download. Just go to app.tncradio.live, Google Play, or the App Store. Get access to live streaming radio developed by drivers for drivers. Download the tncradio.live app today.